when I started this work, and Peggy mentioned Nelson Mandela, in 2002, the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and Malaria had just been set up and not fully funded. President Bush's PEPFAR program, which I believe was the outstanding accomplishment of his presidency, had not yet been passed and funded. There was very little money being spent to fight the AIDS epidemic. The United States was putting up about a fourth of it in my last budget, still not very much, a few $100 million. And Mandela and I were at the International AIDS Conference in Barcelona. We had agreed to co-chair a group of former presidents which basically committed themselves to going around the world and rattling a tin cup, pleading for assistance from people who were still in office and had money to fight the AIDS epidemic. And after we spoke, at the end of the conference, Denzil Douglas, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean, came up to me. At the time, the Caribbean had the world's second fastest growing AIDS rates. And he was an old friend of mine and a doctor. He said, "Bill, we have no stigma problem here. And the government is not reluctant, not in any Caribbean country. We have a money problem and an organization problem. We can't figure out how to do this." And I said, "Well, Denzil, what do you want me to do about it?" And Mandela was there elbowing me. He said, "I want you to fix it." So I said, "Okay." At the time, we had about 10 people working for the foundation. I had to build a library in Little Rock. I didn't have a clue. But when I started looking at it, it was obvious that you had all these well-meaning people all around the world who desperately wanted to stop millions of people from a certain death sentence, and yet the markets were totally fractured and disorganized. At the time, the price of generic AIDS medicine was $500 a person a year, and for pediatric medicine, $600 a year. There were next to no children who were HIV positive or even who had full-blown AIDS who were getting medicine. And in the whole world, outside the wealthy countries, only 200,000 people were getting medicine. Two-thirds of them were in Brazil and Thailand, which had their own pharmaceutical industries and could either produce the medicine or bargain for it. So I started looking at it. It was amazing. The first week, we had a triumph which gave us a sense of false security. The first week, we were asked to go into the Bahamas, which after Haiti and the Dominican Republic then had the third highest rates of AIDS, but the best healthcare delivery system and a real commitment to doing something about it. They were paying for this $500 medicine manufactured in India $3,500. Why? Because the market was so fractured it was going through two agents. So we fixed that. All we had to do was to call the government, tell them they were being hosed, call the manufacturer, and ask them to send the medicine. So I thought, man, this is going to be a snap. Poof, overnight, we're serving 6 times as many people, even with the delivery cost. But then I realized that the Indian companies, they were very proud of the fact that they were producing this generic AIDS medicine, and it was of a high quality. But essentially, the volumes were low, the payment was uncertain, so the profit margin, even at $500, while we pay $10,000 a year at my AIDS clinic up in Harlem, right around the corner from my office, you do that, you pay that so we can serve them. The profit margins were still quite high. So after a period of discussion, we said, look, suppose we come in and bring in people to help you with the manufacturing efficiencies and the supply chain, and we guarantee you a massive volume and a certain timely payment. Would you change your business model from high margin, low volume, uncertain payment to low margin, high volume, certain payment? And I said, I'll make you a deal. If you don't make more money this way, we'll cancel the contracts. But I said, we got millions of people dying out there. So that's how this whole thing started. The price, we immediately cut the price from $500 to $140 because the governments of Canada and Ireland promised me $20 million a year each for 5 years. And I asked them not to give me the money. I said, I want you to give it to the governments involved so they can buy the medicine, but just don't give it till I green light it. And just with that little bit of guarantee, the price dropped to $140. Then it was $20. Then it was $90. The children's medicine dropped from $600 to $60, 90%. Then the generic version of the 1-pill treatment, not the 3-pill treatment, came out, and we soon had it under $200. Then we did the same thing with generic drugs, then with the testing equipment. And it became a model. Then so that's how we got to $4 million. That money is not money that I have. That money comes from the Global Fund, from bilateral aid, and from the American PEPFAR program going into these medicines. And the impact was wider than that because it soon became obvious that it was not ethical or practical for contracts we negotiated to be half what everybody else was paying or less. So the whole price structure collapsed to within 10 to 15% of what we were paying. But the point is, we did it by getting people together and working on a solution that may seem boring, that no one talked about, but it saved millions of lives. Poor countries need systems that we take for granted. You just think about what you're taking for granted tonight. You'd be shocked if the lights went out, if the microphone failed, if the screen went dark, if the air conditioning went off and you were made uncomfortable by all this hot air I'm putting out. And if you get really bored with what I'm saying, you can get up and go to the restroom. When I was attending the inauguration of the new president of Haiti, the microphone failed. It was a metaphor for the challenges of poor people in the developing world. They're just as smart as we are. They have just as big a dreams. They work harder to keep body and soul together, but they don't have systems that work. And the only way you can get them to move from largely monopoly-dominated, inefficient, ridiculously expensive, and often ineffective systems is to figure out how everyone can share the future. And I see that everywhere I go. If you believe in an interdependent world, we have to build towards societies of shared opportunities, shared prosperity, shared responsibilities, and in tough times, shared sacrifices. The only way to do it is with a decision-making process which models what Synergos has been doing for 25 years. Nothing else works.